Good morning and welcome to the latest in our Chief Value Officer webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity and basically how we can actually get some value, how we gain value out of actually looking at cybersecurity. We don't want to be talking about fear, we want to be talking about how we actually really gain value. Just to start off, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Now, we've just got some quick housekeeping on the webinar. So questions, we do like to try and answer them during the webinar today. So please feel free to send out any questions, put it into the question tab there. If we don't get to you, we will try and respond after the webinar, but we do try to do this in live today. If you are experiencing technical issues, please go to support.goto.com/webinar and you can get some support there from that perspective. As part of the follow-up, we will send through a couple of quick slides that we've got, a link to the webinar recording, access to all the other webinars we've had in this series, and also the details of the speakers today. Now, speaking about the speakers, today joining me is Mohit and Kamal. Mohit, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. My name is Mohit Malik. I'm partner in cybersecurity at BDO Sydney. I've been with BDO for past 2 years, working closely with some of our mid-tier and large clients to uplift their cybersecurity and operational resilience posture. Before joining BDO, I was leading cyber and resilience for payment operations at one of the big four banks, and I've led cyber security and resilience function at a couple of other large technology organizations. I'm also studying, doing my PhD in cybersecurity of AI agents or agentic AI. Great to be here today and looking forward to sharing some insights from my experience and from some of the clients we've worked with. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you very much, Mohit. Thank you, and really appreciate your time today. It's great to have you here. And also we've got Kamal. Kamal, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Nick, and welcome from my side for everyone who's joining the webinar. My name is Kamal Prasad. I am a partner with the digital advisory team within BDO. And as a part of the digital advisory, we focus on a few critical aspects, which links back to the Chief Value Officer as well as cybersecurity. So the first one is around designing as to what your digital strategy should be. So what are the opportunities you can unlock by using data and leveraging what digital can offer. The second part of our services are predominantly around helping our clients enable that. So from strategy to we help them deliver the outcomes. And then the third part is around technology optimization, where we look at what the clients are doing now and how they can use technology to optimize their operations. While it's slightly different from the topic that we are talking about today, but it connects back to the CF as Chief Value Officer, in the sense that most of our sponsors and critical stakeholder is the CFO organization. So that's where the funding and the governance comes in. And then we work very closely with the cybersecurity team to make sure that everything that we are doing in the digital space ensures that there is protection of the data, the cyber risks are getting managed, and then we are leveraging the data in the constraints or the boundaries within which it can actually deliver the best value for us. So that's what my role is within BDO, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation with Nick and Mohit.
Thank you very much. We've got some great people here to talk about this interesting topic as well. Just quickly before we really jump into things, I think I've got a bit of a weird lighting. We are in a new building here at BDO in Sydney, so we're sort of still figuring some of this stuff out. But to that point, if you are in Sydney and you do want to come for a coffee, please feel free to reach out to any of the three of us, and we'd be happy to show you around the new building and check out the view as well. And that's really important. So do feel free to reach out and see if you want to come and grab a coffee. Now, starting off, thought I'd jump on to off the slides now. Starting off, I think it's really important to create sort of a baseline understanding here from this perspective. So when we're talking about cybersecurity and what we actually mean, I think I might throw to Mohit quickly now to quickly talk about what we mean and understand around cyber and cybersecurity.
Thanks, Nick. A really good question to start with. I'll probably talk about the modern organizations, which is basically 2018 to now 2025, which are basically, whether it's a small or a big enterprise, they all rely very heavily on data. Data or information is at the heart of decision making, and we're talking about your customer information, your sensitive financial information, your health data, customer identifiers like driving license, passport. This is the data which enterprises usually collect to, give services to your customers, and it also includes intellectual property, some other sensitive information, which is basically your business critical information, which helps you run the business, and give you competitive advantage. Now, because of all that, data is essentially the critical asset which the organizations must protect. And that is what, when we talk about cybersecurity, we were almost always essentially referring to the protection you put in place to safeguard that data or information. However, you can't really protect data. You have to protect the container within which this data is there. So, and that containers is usually a system or an application, digital tools or platforms which you use, and which is what your business runs on. And again, think of all the tools you use, whether it's a payroll software or an online banking platform or an inventory system, your customer-facing website or mobile app. These are the systems which contain those data elements which needs to be protected. And some of these systems are interconnected. They rely on cloud. They are run by your service providers. They involve data moving between your internal and internal interfaces. And that's why cybersecurity is not really an IT or technical issue. It's a strategic business risk because it is all about the value of a business, which is the data. And it talks about different elements of systems and applications. And that's why you apply protective controls on those containers. Now, interestingly, up till 2014, 2015, 10 years back, data was the most important element because that is what you would protect. But then around that time, a lot of ransomware events starts to happen, and that evolved to become the major threats. In terms of, which reinforce that you need to protect your system and application, even though it may not contain critical information. So there have been number of incidents, since from that time till today, where ransomware attack locks down the organization with little impact on data, but major impact on, your organizational resilience. And that's why I think when you take a step back and going back to that fundamental question of what is cybersecurity, you need to first identify what is your critical data, what needs protection, and New South Wales cybersecurity policy puts it beautifully. It calls it crown jewels. So you identify your crown jewels, see where they are living, which is your systems, and then apply those cybersecurity controls to protect it. So yeah, essentially that's that. That's hopefully I've done justice in defining what cybersecurity is.
That's really useful to understand basically that concept of cybersecurity. It's more of a process and a controls as opposed to necessarily a system or application. And to that point, Kamal can probably answer this question. We talk about systems and applications. Are those interchangeable topics, or are those distinctly different things?
Yeah. So I think to address that question, Nick, we'll probably, if you take a step back and look at how organizations are generating value for their customers or clients. 15, 20 years back, everything would be all in-house. So I'm doing everything all the way from sourcing the product to manufacturing it to moving it, and then reconciling it to reconciling the invoices, etc., etc. Now things have changed where there are ecosystems that are coming together to generate that value. And by that, what I mean is there is specialization in every part of that value chain. So you might be working with a specialized logistics provider for your last mile. You might be working with a third-party supplier for certain activities. You may be having an outsourced service provider managing some of your systems. You might be having an outsourced payroll processes. What that's doing is it's changing the landscape within which we are operating from doing everything ourselves to doing it as a network. So when we look at applications, typically those applications relate to what's in the control of what we are doing. When we look at system more holistically, it's basically all the integration and the interconnected applications that are coming together to deliver to the value that you want to deliver. So for example, you may have an order management system where you're capturing the order, but then you are sending it to your third party manufacturer to actually fulfill that order. And that third party manufacturer might be sending it to a logistics provider who is then fulfilling and sending that order to your customer. Now, in this case, there are probably 4 different applications that are talking to each other, transmitting information, passing data, and passing activities from one to another. Now, when you start looking at that network of applications that come together, that's what creates the system that delivers value. And if you put it back into the context of what Mohit was talking about, the amount of data that's getting transmitted through these connected applications, that's where there is a criticality to understand as to what data is moving around, what is the criticality of that data, and then what is the process and control that we put around that, so that we are not only focusing on managing what's within our control, but also managing what is within the connected applications that we are working in.
That makes sense. I also think that's a really, really good sort of analogy there. And it was really interesting. I was just reflecting on what you were just saying there as well, and what Mohit was talking about before in terms of the cyber attacks not only are going after the data as one element, but now also the ransomware, where they can actually just stop the communication between systems, between applications, for instance, and almost break the system. Is kind of,
Yep.
maybe that's me being simplistic, but it's
Absolutely.
that's conceptually where I can see.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely, and that's that's this story which we keep seeing, and it plays over and over and over again. And obviously, I won't name the organization, but a quick Google search would tell you there was and it's a very recent information, which is there was a US maker of cleaning products hit by a cyber attack. Systems got disrupted. And in terms of the business processes which were impacted were order processing and manufacturing. And as a result, the company had to manually process orders for weeks. And that led to product shortages and few other things around that. So in the latest earning report, this was very recent, the organization actually reported an estimated $49 million in direct cost from the impact, and obviously there are going to be indirect cost as well, and net sales decline of about 20%. This was from their own earning reports, and I think if I remember correctly, there was this loss per share which was around 35% of 75%, in a quarter ending September 30th, which was last year, and in the previous year they had actually reported a profit of 68 cents per share. So from a profit of 68 cents per share to a loss of about 75 cents in the quarter. The only thing which was different was that cyber attack, which kind of made them um, do those processing of orders manually, which basically compromise their order processing manufacturing capability. So it was not data, it was these systems which were impacted and real financial loss to the organization. And there are many such examples which are out there. Which to what Kamal said, there are so many systems which are integrated and working together, and that's what we use. We use a network rather than an
Mm.
individual system to get the work done. And any of those gets compromised, you're kind of feeling the pain straight away in the financial terms.
No, that's really good. So what we talk about there, I mean, I suppose we might park this concept, but it's effectively talking about the downside risk here. But
Yeah,
I think there's probably opportunities, and we can talk about this in a moment. But I just want to touch on something. Kamal actually mentioned that one of his stakeholders that he deals with a lot, and you're probably dealing with the same stakeholder as well, is the CFO.
yeah.
Why do you think CFOs and finance teams in particular are being tasked with looking after cybersecurity or being looking at these elements? Why are they your stakeholders? Why are people coming to you from the finance team? I might open it up for either of you to
I,
answer.
Okay,
Let's jump
I'll
in
probably
first.
go first, and then Kamal can add, in case I've missed any critical point. I think one thing which we've seen, and I think probably industry also recognize that cybersecurity is not just a technology risk. There are different facets to it. There are different angles to it: financial, operational, regulatory, reputational. There's so many different elements to it. And in case there is a cyber attack, I think industry has realized that it hits the balance sheet first.
Hmm.
And that's why CFOs are interesting, whether it's ransomware payments or business disruptions or regulatory fines, or the cost of remediation and recovery. CFO is the first function which basically gets to see the impact of any cyber impact or cyber attack. Um, So that's primarily the first thing, and then another point would be around the value, organizational value, and today value is also seen in the data, digital services, and customer trust. And cybersecurity basically helps you safeguard all those elements. Um, and in many businesses, you would see cyber is, CFO or finance function is also responsible for elements like cybersecurity, budgeting for security investment, risk register, governance reporting. So it makes sense for them to also get involved in cyber, and in organization where CIO or CISOs may not be on the executive table, then obviously CFO bears that responsibility on clear ownership in terms of cyber risk, and basically they are the natural stewards of enterprise risk, so they kind of hold that hat of looking at the cybersecurity risk as well. So I think those are the four key elements which
Yeah.
I think basically push CFOs to look at cyber risk as well. Kamal, any
Yep,
thoughts
yep.
on that?
And I think you've covered the risk part of it quite well, Mohit. Where we get involved from a digital perspective is all of our engagements are either focused around generating better top line or
Yeah,
focusing on the cost part of it. Now, if I have to split between a top line growth and cost, majority of the activity that we get involved is around the cost optimization, which is
Mm.
what do we do different so that we can deliver the same or better value with a
yeah,
lesser cost. So that's where the CFOs are becoming more and more responsible for optimization, cost reduction, and value maximization, which is where the topic of this conversation is.
Mm.
So invariably, in their role as the chief driver of value and looking at value optimization, they start focusing on what can be done through digital and what can be done through data to to deliver that value. So whether it's process optimization or it's around improving responsiveness to the customers, or improving service to their clients, or in fact in just how do we actually manage our back offices function better. So that's where they get involved in a lot of these strategic transformation projects, and their involvement has probably 2 or 3 different lenses to it. First, obviously the funding for a lot of these engagements sit with them. So they've got a keen interest to make sure that the value for money is getting delivered out of those initiatives. So they bring that funding, governance, and the and maximizing what can be delivered against that in there. The second part is they are also providing a lot of sponsorship on these projects, where if some of the digital projects are delivering the value to the organization, they become the sponsor for our projects. And then the third part is, given that the finances is the foundation where everything drops in, they also provide that constant feedback whether what we are doing is actually helping move the needle or not. So if I look at their role from funding to governance to monitoring the value generation, that's where CFOs are becoming the key stakeholders for us, and they are driving a lot of the digital initiatives. They are taking ownership of that and making sure that the organization is best capable of looking into the digital aspects of it. The second piece is, while we are talking about digital, it also links back to the data story that Mohit, that you were talking about, because a lot of the optimization is now coming through adoption of AI or agents in the organization. And a big sort of focus is on back office. So whether it's finance transaction processing, AP, AR processes, optimizing on reporting, the effort that goes into reporting, or making sure that there is this constant feedback that's coming from the business around performance. That's where the use of data and use of AI is becoming critical, and the CFOs have got a lot of interest in making sure that the organizations are leveraging those technologies and getting value out of it.
That's really, really useful. I think that's something that we were sort of talking about before when we were sort of talking about this webinar, was the concept of your architecture and the efficiencies that you can gain out of effectively good practices that should be I sort of talk about standardized practices that should be coming in. I look at things like data cleansing exercises that the finance team should be doing. But when both, I think, Kamal and Mohit, you think about it in a little bit of a different manner. I think about cleaning the data. Kamal, you think about efficiency and value. And Mohit, you would probably think about it from the perspective of, and I'm speaking for you, so please jump in if I'm wrong, but you would look at it from the perspective of less data, less opportunity to effectively have it targeted. But also, I think one of the protections from a cybersecurity perspective is knowing where your data is, knowing what data you actually have is one of the critical things. And I think,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and Nick,
Sorry.
just to sort of bring what you were saying into a slightly different language. So
Yeah.
we build the house, we build the digital and data house. Mohit and his team, they go and secure it so that no one is just going into that house without having proper authorization or authentication. And Nick, in your CFO advisory, you just come and monitor the house to make sure that we are delivering it on time, budget, and it's going to meet all the specifications that are required. So I think that's how we sort of see working together across the different spectrum of what's involved in this conversation.
I
love
actually
that
like that.
analogy.
It's a good analogy.
I,
I also think there's sorry, Mohit, but I think there's an element there of I create the practices of making sure that we're throwing the garbage out, where we're doing those regular things on a regular
yeah,
basis, so that the house doesn't just fill up with stuff
No, I think yeah, you're
Absolutely.
absolutely right, and I'll probably build on those analogies started it. Um, but you're right. I think when you're looking at some of those basic hygiene practices, you're not just protecting, you're not just looking at the downside risk of cyber, but then upside, which
Mm,
is the value which it creates. Data cleansing is so essential in terms of ensuring that you've got accurate, up-to-date information about clients, about transactions, about financials. Um, and it directly supports your revenue growth and better decision making. There's no decision you can, I'm sure there would be some use cases around it, but if you have a 10-year-old data sitting in your data warehouse, that's not going to aid your decision making. Your decision making is always all on the more contemporary, newer data element. The older data set is just a risk to the organization. So
yeah.
the better cleaning you do, the less liability you would have. And again, talking about that house analogy, you don't want to stack your house with gold bars, right? Because there is a risk of theft, there's a risk of robbery. But if you just keep what you need on a day-to-day basis to operate, that is what you want, and the rest of the you know gold bars can actually sit in the bank where it is well protected. Um, and using the house analogy, I think there are other controls as well. CFOs are always obviously worried about segregation of duties, your user access. So when you look at your house, I'm again using that analogy. If a guest comes in, you don't straight away allow them inside the house to the bedroom. You would maybe make them sit in the lobby somewhere. So you need to have proper walls within the house itself. You need to have doors within the house,
Yeah.
and you need to have segregated areas. So ensuring things like user access, multi-factor authentication, segregation of duties. These are essentially good practices which ensures that whatever data you're keeping, you're getting the best value out of it and reducing the risk for any compromise. So I think that's what I would add. So love that analogy, Kamal, about the house. I'll probably
It's
use that a couple of times again.
we'll torture that metaphor by the end of this. But I think there's a really interesting area there as well. I mean, there's a lot of clients that I deal with where we actually look at practices, in the APAR space, for instance, where I'll talk about cleansing your master supplier data list on a regular basis. Um, because from a governance perspective, you don't want to have old suppliers open forever. You want to make sure that they're closed off, and old customers as well. You want to be closing them off because if I look at a data set and I say, look, we've got 1,000 customers, the next question is, well, how many of those are active? How many of those have bought from us in the last year? And actually, if we know that our data sets are constantly cleansed, I actually don't have to ask that question, which makes our conversation more efficient. So if I know that we're constantly cleansing the data set, I know that we're turning customers to inactive if they don't buy anything from us for a year or something along those lines. If we don't, then effectively, if I know that that's our practice, or what are we doing to try and reactivate those customers? They're different conversations as opposed to, yes, we've got 1,000 customers here that we're dealing with. We can ask better questions with that data because we actually know it's cleaner. But from if I think about Mohit's perspective, there is if I've got 1,000 customers or 10,000 customers or 100,000 customers sitting on our ledgers, if I have 90,000 of those 100,000 are inactive, that's a whole load of data there that is just wasted. But it's also something that people might be interested in getting at. So not only do I gain efficiency, but I also remove liability or risk. So turning around this one, I see a lot of finance team members looking at systems and things like that to bring applications to try and make their lives more efficient and more effective. I think, Kamal, from your perspective, and then we'll get Mohit's view on it, is when deciding to implement a new system or application, what should finance team members think about? Because we like to try and become more efficient, but also we've talked about in previous webinars here in this series that finance team members are also quite conservative. There's a view that the finance team can't really fail. other teams are kind of allowed to fail a little bit when they try new things out. But when you're doing something like implementing a new payroll system or application, you really can't fail on that one. But when thinking about new systems or applications, what should the finance team members think about? What in all these respects? I mean, we've talked a bit about efficiency, we've talked about security. What are the risks in implementing the wrong system? And what is the upside in trying to think about doing it right? So that's a really long-winded way of asking that question.
Yep, no, it's a great question, Nick, and I'll try and sort of break it down into a couple of different areas. And I'll probably start the question. I'll respond to it in the reverse order that you asked the question. So I think I'll start with the value first, and then I'll go to the risk second. But so if you look at it from a finance team perspective, like we touched upon earlier, they are keenly focused on cost and keenly focused on the risk part of it. And those are the two lenses, in my experience, where a lot of the conversations revolve around when we're talking to the CFOs. Now, if I go back into just the applications or the landscape within which our CFO teams or the finance teams work, most of the organizations will have a landscape or system landscape that would have evolved over a period of time. And most of that would be either in-house or some of that would be on the cloud. It's typically a sort of a mishmash of a lot of different things that have to be held together to enable the end-to-end process. So you might have AP, which is working in a different through a different channel. You'll have your financial recording happening in one place. You will have a different reporting application. You might have a separate payroll, separate time and attendance system. All of those things, to hold that together, takes a lot of effort, both from the people who are there and also potentially more focused on managing the repetitive task rather than using that group to add value at the next level. So that becomes a big focus for us when we are talking to the CFOs in terms of how do we rationalize what their digital landscape is, how do we move it to the cloud, and make sure that all these advanced capabilities that are coming on from data, analytics, AI, they can be embedded or they can be brought into the organization in the quickest possible time. So a lot of discussion with the finance team is around how is digital going to make your life easier and how is it going to add value to what you're trying to deliver. That's one part of it.
Yeah.
The second part is if you look at, especially if you look at a payroll system, you can't get it wrong. It has to run all the time with 100% accuracy. And that's where once you start having those things on-prem, outdated, the risk of that technology failure is very high. So that's where there is a lot more emphasis to say, hey, can we actually do something different so that we can sleep better at night, knowing that tomorrow when we get up, we'll have the salaries paid, it's going to be in the bank, the process is going to get delivered, and there is a positive assurance around just having those things sorted out. So managing that risk part of it, which sits within a lot of the finance function areas, again, that creates conversations for us with the CFOs and their teams. Now, what's the implication of getting it wrong? I think it depends on the area, because some of those areas, especially like reporting. Probably I'll get Mohit for you to talk about it, but I'll take a class.
Yeah, no, I have some water. Yeah, I think Kamal, I think beautifully covered the breadth of it, which is providing, looking at that value chain and some of those areas which he talked about um, drastically improves the cybersecurity position of a platform.
Yep.
Things like putting it in cloud. You don't have to manage it in house. You don't have to have teams. securing it. So, a lot of controls are automatically derived, inherited from the cloud providers, and they run it. Obviously, they have all the resources in the world to manage it. So I think those broad contours which Kamal talked about is absolutely must have. I'll just talk about the depth of the kind of cybersecurity controls which you would want to apply, and then and again, let's pick up an example. Payroll or vendor management system. Let's say if you're implementing a vendor management system, the first step is almost always is what kind of data the system will handle. What is the sensitivity of that information? And how long are you going to keep that information? I think that is what will drive the kind of cybersecurity controls you would want to apply. And cybersecurity controls are essentially, you know, I would place it in two different buckets. One is the technical controls, which would derive from different cybersecurity frameworks. NIST cybersecurity framework is one such framework, ISO 27001. There's Essential 8, which is must have, foundational essential 8 controls, which you should deploy: user access, multi-factor authentication, restricting admin privileges. Those are the technical controls you would want to have. Surprisingly, in Australia, we had these cyber attacks. I think it was a month back or month and a half back on super funds, and there were some funds which were kind of compromised. And it was surprising to note that even for some of those critical financial systems, controls like multi-factor authentication was not implemented. So ensuring some of those controls are there, that is an important element. So those technical controls. Now when you come to the business process controls, you have to understand how the business will use those technology platforms. For example, vendor management system, that they have business email compromise, which almost always, attackers are always trying to, either impersonate a CEO, and high pressure situation, they would want a vendor payment to be made. There's so many of these examples which have been successfully, some of these attacks have been successfully executed. So you understand what are those business, how the business process will be executed on that platform, and then you put in controls around that. Either it's through awareness in this case, or you would put in some sort of a segregation of duties, some sort of an approval mechanism. So those are the two main things which you do: cyber and business process one. And the third thing, which is the underlying one, is basically knowing that the system will eventually fail at some time. It can get compromised, it can have an outage, it can go down. So you would have controls like backup, like disaster recovery. You do some sort of a cyber simulation, you develop some sort of a playbook, and that would cover all the three elements of it: cyber, resilience, as well as business process. And one thing which we always tell our stakeholder, and when I was not a consultant, I was on the other side of the table, I would always consider is that when you're looking at the solution, don't look at it from the cheapest solution perspective. Always look at the total cost of ownership, because some of these elements, when you're going to talk about implementing it, they can get very expensive. So you want to have a solution which is basically giving you all these services as an add-on, and you don't really have to bolt on this later. So think of secure by design kind of a system. So those are the three key elements you would look at when you're buying or building a new platforms.
And
What
just
I
building on
find
the
really,
cost. Sorry.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Kamal.
I was just, you talked about the cost of ownership, total cost of ownership for some of these applications. One is definitely the investment that goes in making it happen, but the cost of getting it wrong is a lot higher than just the investment that goes into those. So, the risks that we were talking about, Nick, around the finance systems and applications that I think the risk is just making sure that they are secure by design, making sure that you're actually keeping your core clean, so that you're not putting too many customizations or hooks on top of it, which is where I think you start creating more opportunities for compromise. And then the last one is going into those changes with a very clear definition of what success looks like. because if you don't have that clear definition of what success looks like, it's very hard to control what is going to get delivered, and it's very hard to get some of those critical elements like cyber reporting, data, all of those organized in a way that's going to deliver value for the business.
I think that's a really good point. I wanted to circle back on you also mentioned the Essential Eight. I really like that concept, and I think basically anyone can look at that, from large, medium, small. Everyone can go through that process, and I think what's really interesting now, and Kamal could probably also touch on this, is whether you're a large organisation, a medium-sized organisation, or a small organisation, your tech stack can still be very protected regardless of the size of the organisation. Just because you might be in a smaller business and you don't necessarily have the funding of, say, a CBA, you can still get those enterprise-grade softwares that are protected, that is inbuilt, and I think that sort of security it's security as it's inbuilt is a really important concept. I've worked with a number of different organisations at different sizes, and part of the question I had before around sort of looking at that implementation of software and systems and applications is effectively around, I've seen too many finance teams sometimes saying, oh, well, we need a new reporting application. And so they basically go find something and plug it in, but they never actually disconnect their old system or application. So you've got something that could be sitting there still drawing data, but no one's ever looked at it for the last 5 years. But it's still drawing that critical data, or it's still got access. And all of a sudden there is an efficiency you're gaining from the new reporting system potentially, but you've actually left a back door open. If we're using the house analogy, I'm sort of jumping around there. So it's effectively making sure that we're still protected, but looking at that whole system architecture to say, what are we still actually utilizing? What still has access to our infrastructure? And that applies, I think, for large organizations, medium-sized, small. I think also here, and this is an interesting one, some of the companies that we work with a lot are high-growth, fast-growth organizations. So you might be a finance team dealing with Xero and you've got a lot of Xero plugins, but all of a sudden you jump over to a bigger system, a NetSuite, Business Central, Microsoft Finance and Operations, but all of a sudden you've still left your Xero system there, application, with all of its add-ons still in situ. So have you shut that down? Have you taken that data out? Have you closed all the links off the API links, etc.? Have you made sure that's happened? I'm sort of feel like I'm preaching a little bit here, but what do you guys think about that?
Nick, you're absolutely right. And I'll probably go back to the housing, that housing analogy. And I think people would know that this podcast, this webinar is being done in Sydney because we are talking about housing a lot, and using that as an example. So when you look at, whether it's a small organization or a large organization, I think there's a term which we use very frequently in cybersecurity, which is called attack surface and attack surface monitoring. It is basically knowing how many doors you have where somebody, who's not really the member of the family can come in. And it is important to protect those elements, and just keep a very good eye on, how well your attack surface is being monitored and protected. Typically, the larger the organization, the bigger is the attack surface. Smaller the organization, depending on how it is set up, smaller would be the attack surface. However, I've seen smaller organizations also having a large attack surface because there are sometimes these innovative organizations which would keep trying and piloting different systems, jumping from one solution to another, to another. They would not get rid of the previous solution, like the example of Xero, which you talked about, Nick. and they would leave their data footprint everywhere. And all you need is one system to get compromised. Um, and essentially, what is surprising is they don't even have a good record of how many systems their data is living in. So no record of asset management. There's no crown jewel assessment. So they don't know what kind of systems they are living with. And large organizations, while they have a larger footprint, they also have larger budgets to manage it. But that doesn't mean that if you're a small organization, you can't protect your systems really well. I've seen, and this is, a few reviews which we have done very recently, a very small setup being managed beautifully because one, they were not leaving too many access points on the internet, so their attack surface was very, very beautifully managed. And internally in the organization, user access management, which I would probably classify as lock, your keys of the house, internal doors, that was beautifully managed. Once you have that, once you have multi-factor authentication implemented, once you have locked down your systems on the internet, half the job is done. And then it's all about the regular other basic hygiene processes around vulnerability management, doing regular pen testing to ensure your position is as secure as you found out or as you have designed it to be. But that is essentially it. Keeping that attack surface balance is a key element to securing yourself. And it is absolutely, there's no correlation between big or a small organization. We've seen in Australia a few big ones getting compromised and getting a bad name for themselves. So there's no correlation between the two.
Yeah. And from that perspective, I think, Kamal, thrown to you, the attack surface is one element. But I mean, at the end of the day, a smaller attack surface is also probably a cleaner architecture.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. And there are two parts to it. So the architecture is around telling you as to what you have and what you need to manage. So it's a very clean picture of this is our stack now, and this is where our processes are going to get delivered. Everything else gets decommissioned either immediately or over time. So that's one part of it. So architecture absolutely very, very critical. I think equally critical is just one level underneath the architecture also, which is what data is getting captured. So we talk about data catalog and data classification, which is absolutely critical. So it's around what information is getting captured, where it's getting captured, what's the criticality of that, and what are the access rights and authentications associated with that. So while architecture gives you the little blueprint, just going one level underneath that to understand as to where all of those data points are sitting, I think between those two, it gives you confidence that you are actually managing your architecture better and you have a good understanding of what you have and what's the risk associated with each one of those. So I think having that lens across everything that is being thought through in the IT application landscape becomes more and more critical.
I think also if I bring it back to the chief value officer concept as well here is a simpler architecture where potentially you're using single applications, whilst you may not necessarily get 100% of what you want. By the way, no one ever gets 100% of what they want out of an application or a system. If you've got a single source of truth and a single system working, I think you end up getting more efficiency out of that as well. There's efficiency gains in having that locked up. So there's definitely opportunity there to actually add a lot of value through thinking about things such as you said, that sort of attack surface, but also then the simplification of the architecture. I think there's a lot to be gained out of that, to actually say, look, yes, the reporting suite that's native to this application isn't as good as this third party over here, but actually bolting that third party in creates a greater attack surface, but it also, we still have to do implementations. We have to transport the data across. There has to be an API. There's cleansing. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to occur. Whereas if we actually just have it all in the single space, we can probably get a better result and a more efficient result. So I think that's something to think about.
And also, I think, building on the concept that where we all started this conversation, Nick, the chief value officer. I think, in my mind, the way it's evolving is it's maybe two sides of the same coin, but on one side is chief value creator, and the other side is chief value protector. And I think that's the balance that the CFOs have to go through, and the CFO organizations will have to look into as they're transitioning from CFOs to the chief value officers. And I think creating that balance around creation and protection, I think that'll create a more holistic approach to managing digital data and everything else that comes along with it.
So we've got a couple of questions that have popped up. There was one that actually came in initially, which I thought was quite interesting, in terms of what can individuals actually do to protect themselves. I think that's an interesting one because as an individual, I don't know why you would change your behaviour from personal to work. So if I wouldn't click on that link at work, I probably shouldn't click on it at home. I might quickly throw to Mo here. This is quite a simple. I think this is quite simple. I've been a pain in the neck at my daughter's school because they asked for permission to share a whole load of data with things like the photo people who wanted to know a whole load of biometric data about my daughter. I'm like, what? Why do you need to know that? Seriously, you're taking photos. But in any case, I think my concept here, and I'll let you guys speak in a moment, my concept here is why would you have a differentiation between work and personal? If you're doing the same, if you're protecting the stuff at work, you should probably do the same practices at home as an individual.
100%, Nick. I don't think there is, and to be honest, if I look at it, I would actually think that you have more at stake when you're implementing controls or thinking about securing yourself compared to the organization, because your own financial data, your own information is at risk, and there is better control as well. Like a lot of times, when you're working in an enterprise setup, you're dependent on the organization's IT team to implement some of those controls for you, which may not be in your hand. You might just report that this application doesn't have the right security profile. An IT team, may not have budgets, or would be, there would be a program of works which would be in, which would be in works. So you would be relying on them to implement some of those controls. But when it comes to your own individual security, you are the one who's responsible for your own security. I think there are two main elements which I'll probably talk about, which is something which everybody should do. Use strong, unique password and get a good password manager. That's the fundamental thing everybody should be doing. And then enable multi-factor authentication in all the applications which you use. If there is an application which doesn't provide MFA, don't use it. It's better for that business to lose you as a customer than for you to use that service which is not secure enough. So I mean, those are the two non-negotiables which I would suggest you have. And then there are other elements as well, which totally depends on the demographic and behavioral profile. I know that a lot of us cannot go off Facebook, cannot go off Instagram and other social media apps, but these are the elements which, in the age of AI, AI is building. It's very easy to build your profile. We've kind of heard so many attacks where CEOs, LinkedIn profile or some pictures were used to create a deep fake video. which was used to compromise. I think this happened in Hong Kong, where about 20 million, $25 million were transferred by the finance team because the CEO's deepfake video said, you need to do it now. So there's a lot of data of ours which is all over the internet through these social media apps. If that can be contained in some way, and like if you're not using Facebook, I think it makes sense to shut it down. Or if you're not using Instagram that much, it makes sense to lock it down. And I understand not everybody can do it. It depends on your own preferences, but using strong passwords with the password manager and multi-factor authentication, those are two non-negotiables. I think everybody should totally do that.
Great. There's just one more question. We probably don't have enough time to answer it completely, but we will take it also on notice and probably provide a bit of a broader answer. But are there considerations related to the broader data sharing of data, e.g., one, consumer data rights between organisations, and two, cross-border considerations, i.e., what are the emerging risks?
Yeah, that's a good question, Nick. I think we're working with so many of our clients for whom data residency is very important. And regulators are also talking about it. So when it comes to government, whether it's IRAP, which is the federal government focused cybersecurity, attestation, which is based on ISM, New South Wales cybersecurity policy, or whether it's financial services where APRA CPS 234 guides a lot of those discussions, data residency is an important element everywhere. And every time you want to really share data with any organization, you need to ensure that there are data sharing agreements in place. And there are some fundamental elements you would want to know. You want to consider first. You need to take consent from your customers, and you need to give them notification informing them that data is being shared with a third party. You need to be very clear with the purpose. So purpose of collection and the data which is being shared with a third party should be done to meet that purpose. You should not be sharing it for direct marketing kind of purpose, direct marketing kind of a reason, unless you are in that business. Then you need to ensure that while the data is with that third party, in your contract you have built controls or you have built clauses which talks about the security of that data. So data should be encrypted when it is living in that enterprise environment, in that third-party environment. It is deleted after the data's usage has been, completed and it is no longer required. And in case that data is compromised by that third party, it is able to inform you upfront so that you can take action by informing your own customers and safeguard them. I think those are some of the very important elements you would want to consider when you're talking about data sharing with third parties.
I think that's, as I said, it's probably deeper than we've got, given we've got about a minute left. We can provide probably a bit of a further commentary on that. Given the time and that we do have only about a minute left, I thought I'd quickly close off and throw to you guys to sum up your thoughts, but then also let everyone know where they can find you as well and what you'll be doing over the next couple of weeks and months. Mohit, do you want to start?
Thanks, Nick. First of all, thank you so much for inviting both Kamal and I for this webinar. Was a very really interesting chat and a lot of good questions there. And cybersecurity is obviously on top of mind for all the CFOs. And if there are any further questions or if somebody wants to just catch up for coffee, our details are on the website. And yeah, happy to catch up and show around our new office.
Yeah. Absolutely. Everyone's welcome to the new office. Kamal?
Yeah, great conversation, and thank you for organizing that, Nick. Again, like what Mohit said, my details are available on the website and always available to catch up for a coffee or just if you want to bounce some ideas. Happy to share more insights or provide perspectives as required. But yeah, I think But think of Mohit when you want to secure the house. Think of me when you want to build the house, and
Build the
Nick can
house.
go and do everything else.
Perfect. Well, given that, thank you very much. Thank you. I do appreciate your time, and I do appreciate everyone's time who's attending. So we do look forward to it. And again, looking forward to next time. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Nick. Thanks,
Bye.
Kamal. Bye.